I'm Mac. I just want to start off with an apology. I'm outside. You're gonna hear chirping, you're gonna hear a breeze. I have a clip mic, so it's not probably the most legitimate setup, but it works for the now. But what's going on? Welcome back. Episode 2. This is a lot different than any episode I've ever done before. It's a story time, which maybe isn't so much of a podcast dynamic, but I actually get all reference from this episode from the one and only Alex Cooper. So huge shout out to her, and an episode that this is truly inspired from. So today's episode is going to look a little different and sound a little different than most, but I'm super excited to get into it and probably relate to a lot of people that have been in any sort of situation or dynamic like this. Episode 2 is going to fully focus around the topic of relationships, and specifically toxicity within relationships and domestic abuse within relationships. So if that's a topic that isn't settling to you, this might not be the episode for you. So that's definitely a little disclosure there. I just want to be very clear. This episode is fully dedicated to a situation that plays a huge role in my life and how I currently live it. And I just want people to have a different awareness of who they surround themselves with and how they surround themselves with certain people. So again, if toxic relationships or domestic violence or domestic abuse or abuse in general is something that's triggering to you, come back next month, because this one's definitely going to hit home. Thank you for coming back, and we're going to get right into it. So ironically, about 2 weeks ago, I started to record this episode in New York City, which ironically is where this situation took place. And even more ironically, the situation took place almost 2 years to the day of when I was recording it in New York City. And when I was there recording it, I couldn't. I don't know what it was. As I've kind of taken 2 weeks to sit down and think about the reasoning as to why I couldn't, I think that experience truly gave me a new perspective on not only relationships and female and male dynamics, but this story was the first experience I had within New York City. And so now every time I go there, I try to have a 360 change of what New York City is like in my eyes. So I've recorded this episode a good 5-10 times at this point, because I didn't really know exactly the best way to deliver this message. But I think that's because there's no good way of delivering it. And it's a very unfortunate situation that a lot of people I have now found experience. And it's not okay, and it's not normal. And I just want anyone that's been through anything like this to see that there's another side to it. So as I continue to run around and reference something that you're probably like, okay, what are you talking about? Like, we know it happened in New York City. We know it's abuse. We know it's not cute. But what's the actual lore, as the kids say? Well, it all started in Mexico in 2022. So in December of 2022, my family and I went to Mexico for Christmas. We get there, it's absolutely beautiful. Sun is out, birds are chirping, and I think that's why right now I feel a lot better recording this episode here. I'm actually at my sister's house sitting on her finished deck that's almost like inside living room, but it's outside and it's just beautiful, and it's 60 degrees and the wind's blowing and the sun is out and the birds are chirping, and it's reminding me of the peak of this situation and how things can very much so be deceiving. But as I get into this story, I want everyone to always know that when your gut is telling you something, it's never wrong. And never try to push those feelings out because of what your heart or your mind may be telling you, because I feel like that is, your heart a lot of times blocks the clarity of what is reality, and that was truly what happened in this situation. So back to it, we're in Mexico, sun is shining, we take a bus from the airport to the resort. And just to kind of give you perspective where I was, I was 19, about to be 20, so I was very young. I had just gotten out of a very toxic situation, relationship. So I was like kind of there with my family, of course, but also seeking mental clarity and just nudity and open to anything that came in my direction is, what I will say. And as soon as we got there, we of course went to the pool, and it was amazing. It was absolutely incredible. And the first couple days were great until, ironically, and I think there's a lot of symbolism in this story, the weather drastically changed. So it went from 80, 90 degrees to sunny, and then for the rest of the trip, it was like crazy storm, winds, cloudy, like couldn't even go outside. And it's just so ironic because that change of weather, that change of scenery completely changed the trajectory of this trip. So to back things up, the second or third day of us being there, I kind of acknowledged that there was a group of people probably between the age of 18 and 25 that were like all hanging out. And I didn't know if they were together. I didn't know what their situation was, but you could definitely tell that this group of like young adults were definitely enjoying themselves, living their life. So over the week of us being together, I would slowly like interact with these people, and maybe when my mom and sister went to the room where my mom and sister were reading, like me and my brother would hang out with them. And we got to know these people, and they were really, really cool. And there was one guy that was in this group of young adults that was definitely, how do I put this? Definitely like head honcho of the group, and gave those somewhat toxic masculine vibes, and thought he was better than everyone, and just that whole toxic masculinity thing. And so he was very off-putting to me at first. I was like, oh my God, like all these people are so cool, but this guy is so like fucking off-putting. Like, oh my God. And so I didn't want to be around him because he was just like so narcissistic and like self-obsessed and just kind of bizarre. Long story short, the third or fourth night, once the weather stopped getting bad, we're like, okay, well, at least at night we can go to these like clubs that were at these resorts that we were staying at. So the group of us went over to this other resort because it was almost like a neighborhood of resorts, but you could go in and out at all of them because they were all owned by the same company. And so we went over to this club, and I guess there was a girl at one of the other resorts that he had been in cahoots with while being there, because him and his family were there for like a month. Don't know how they afforded that, but actually I lied. I do now know how they afforded that, and we'll get into that. And it's very, very bizarre. So anyway, we go to this club. There's this girl, and he's like tweaking out the whole time and like cussing at this girl, and I'm like, whoa, what's going on? And I guess she was hanging out with him for a couple of weeks while being there, and then this new guy showed up, and she started hanging out with him, and that really made the guy I keep referencing, which, let's give him a code name, John Doe. That's what they call non-nameless people. Okay, so John Doe was very, very mad. And so after he realized that girl was not coming back his way, he then like immediately completely 360 changed the way he treated me. And it was so bizarre because he had always just like not given me the time of day. Not that I really cared, but he was just very off-putting. And then as soon as I saw this interaction and this girl that he liked didn't reciprocate those feelings, he became like obsessive with me, always wanting to hang out with me, super nice to me, super positive, whatever. That night we had like a great time, the whole group of us, but even him, like he was like a whole different person. And I was like, oh my God, this is so amazing. Like this John Doe character can actually be such a cool person, whatever. Well, we're all super lit, whatever. And I kind of call him out on this and the fact that like he's narcissistic and had like a whole completely personality change. And as we were walking back to our resort, he like snapped on me and said that I was delusional and I was mentally insane. And keep in mind, I've known this man for like 3 days of my life. So I'm like, you don't even know me enough. And maybe I didn't know him enough to judge him either, but like his actions had showed this. My actions hadn't showed anything because I was just kind of an innocent bystander. So he like snapped on me, and I was like, okay, thank you for showing me who you are. I am going to leave. And I just went to my room and went to sleep. Well, ironically, the next day, woke up, ran into him. He apologized. Kumbaya, always well. Well, I don't need to go detail for the whole Mexico trip, but just know that the Mexico trip ended all as well, and that I ended up like hanging out with him for the rest of the trip, and he seemed pretty cool. But again, I want to highlight the aspect of when people show you signs, such as snapping at me in the street or calling me insane or calling me delusional or bipolar, when I didn't show anything to him. Like he hadn't even seen half of it. Like honestly, when he said those things, I'm like, for all you know, those could be true, but you don't even know me enough to be making these claims. And even the fact that like you cling on to people like that, those are red flags, right? Those are not green, they're not blue, they're not purple, they're red. And when you realize they're red, accept it and move forward. You know what I mean? And I have such a hard time, and I know a lot of people deal with this. I have a lot of friends that deal with this. I have a hard time when I realize something isn't right. I have a hard time stepping away from it because there's something about it that's worth, quote unquote, fighting for or staying around for. But in all reality, when I take a step back from it, and I have a friend who's in a situation right now, similar dilemma, not as this, but just someone that she probably shouldn't be in cahoots with. And I'm like, I look at it from a step back, and I feel like a lot of us like the chase of these situations. And that's just an unhealthy, toxic trait. And it's something that I definitely need to work on. Like, I can own that myself. So I think, to take a pause from the story and just like look at your life in relationships, things that you know are a red flag or know that aren't good for you, realize why you're still around. And as much as you can like make two columns and be like, okay, here are pros, here are cons. Realistically, there's some things that if they're existent within a person, it won't work. Within this guy, for example, that bipolarness and that toxicity, that never would have worked for me. I want a very peaceful, calm life. So to have someone like that present in my life, oh dear God, I do not want it. Right? So again, just think about your life and think about why you maybe have people around that in your soul shouldn't be around, and in your soul have showed you red flags, and why you continue to stay. Just something to think about. However, back to the story. I leave Mexico. He's still there for like, I think another 5 days or a week, which is insane. And I want to give some background information going into where this takes me, right? This guy's from New York City, kind of, which we'll get into that. And when we were in Mexico, he essentially told me that he's from New York City and that he doesn't really come from much. And he had gone to college and graduated early like me because he was about 20, about my age. And I was like, damn, like finished with college at 20 is crazy, but it happens. People get out of college early. Like my situation wasn't normal either. Like I was a manager at Louis Vuitton at 19, and that's not typical. So I was like, okay, like he's really valid. He has his life together. He had told me that he worked on Wall Street and he was a trader, and it was all just very too good to be true type of situation. But again, I look at my life and my dynamic, and it's not atypical. So I gave him the benefit of the doubt, right? So while we were in Mexico, he painted this picture of a lifestyle that was pretty extravagant, New York City, high-rise penthouse, even down to like the type of car he drove, whatever, and that he completely fully funded his family and his parents' life. And that's who was with him on the trip, his little brother and his parents. And I was like, damn, like this is kind of wild, like very impressive at this like young age. And like, I don't know, I just felt like in a sense we got each other on that note and understood how you can kind of make yourself of something when even though you've maybe had not the perfect upbringing or not the greatest of lifestyle. So I was very impressed, right? So anyway, I leave Mexico, and as I'm leaving, he's like, I really want you to come to New York City. And I was like, yeah, like totally can happen. Like we'll just have to arrange it. From the moment I left Mexico up until my birthday, which was a month almost to the T later, we spoke every day 24/7. Like texted, FaceTimed, everything. And it was all that positive side of John Doe. Like he was communicative, kind, positive, sending me really nice good morning texts, sending me things, doing the most, right? So my birthday, last day of January, 2 weeks go by after Mexico. He's like, okay, like are you able to come? And I'm like, yeah, like I got the time off. I'm going to come. It was 10 days. Like it was going to be a really long amount of time. And we were going to plan all these things to do and go to these dinners. And it was just magical in my mind. Right. And I want to stop there because, again, I know I'm not the only one. And I know this is an issue we all deal with and we all need to definitely work on. Sometimes our mind makes us think things are better than they are, right? If I logically looked at the situation and was like, I just met this man on vacation, not in a real setting, in a magical, all-inclusive resort in Mexico, and it was already iffy within those 7 days of being together. There was a lot of red flags, and his personality was so drastically different between most of those interactions. Why would I think 10 days in New York City as a 19/20-year-old female by myself is a good idea, right? Like logically, you're probably listening to this and you're like, oh yeah, some fuck shit is about to happen. Like you are about to get hit with an awakening. And trust and believe, I literally was hit with an awakening. But hindsight, 1 is 20/20, and 2, your mind makes you think things are better and sometimes worse than they really are. So again, let's fast forward. So I go to New York, right? I'll never forget. I will never forget an inch of this experience. One of the craziest things I've ever been through. So again, all is well. Like everything was absolutely incredible up until the second that damn plane landed, right? So I remember I moved the week before going, and I moved into my own townhouse. It was beautiful. I was ecstatic. I was like, oh my God, I have my own place, my own car, everything at 19. Like my life is amazing. Like I just was so proud and happy for myself. And I was like, everything is truly going in the right direction. And again, me and him were still talking nonstop. Everything was good. I think it was January 28th I left. Maybe earlier than that. But it was a couple days before my birthday. And I left early in the morning. And I had texted him, like, I think my flight left at like 6 a.m. So I didn't assume he would be up at 6 a.m. But I didn't know. So I texted him, like, on my way. Like, I'm at the airport. Okay, I'm taking off. Didn't hear from him. But that wasn't really concerning to me because I was like, it was really early. He was picking me up at like 8 a.m. What was concerning is that when I landed and I expected to open my phone and see like texts or calls, there was nothing. And that's when I realized, okay, this isn't fucking good. This is bad. This is really bad. This is actually horrible. Thankfully, I had a little bit of a network through my clientele and friends that lived in New York, but it was really bad. It was definitely bad. So anyway, I get there. I'm now like, okay, well, I have to wait for my bag, so we'll just hang out. So I'm texting him, calling him, no answer, not a call, not a text, nothing. I now have my bags, still no call, still no text. And at this point, I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, I can get my own place and literally just vibe. But I was 19. So I'm like, okay, I'm either going to have to get it with a fake ID or someone else is going to have to get it for me, or it's going to have to be an Airbnb, or like it's going to be a little bit difficult because of my age. 2, what the fuck am I going to do here? And I was like, you know what? Like you can make it fun. Look shit up, go on TikTok, hit up friends, coworkers, clients, figure it out. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to give it some time. Maybe something happens. So an hour or 2 goes by and finally I get a call from Mr. John Doe himself. And I answer and I'm like, hey, like, is everything okay? And he's like, where the fuck are you? And I'm like, oh no, there's just no way. Where am I? Where am I? Honey, I'm here. Honey, I am literally here. What are you talking about? You know where I am. You see my text? I am literally in, let's just say he's like, I'm in pickup D. I'm like, honey, I've been texting and calling you for hours. Like, what? What do you, you're acting like I went MIA. He's like, but I've been here and like, I told you last night to meet me here and like, I'm not trying to do all this with you. And I was like, okay, I'm coming. So I literally go to like the location he described and I'm still on the phone with him. And I'm like, where are you? Like, I'm literally at the sign that says D. He's like, are you fucking stupid? Like, he's coming at my neck, calling me out my name. Like, I was like, oh my God, like, is he on drugs? Like, I genuinely thought something was wrong with him. So I was like, okay. So I'm like trying to stay calm. I'm already like wound up because I thought the man was going MIA. So finally we come to the realization that he's in departures. And so I was like, I made that clarification to him, and he like again starts airing me out because, oh, you think you're smarter than me? I'm like, no. I'm just arriving to New York City, so I'm in arrivals, right? Like I wasn't even trying to be smart. I was just thinking logically. So I'm like, yeah, I'm in arrivals, and he just loses his ever loving mind. So finally, he shows up in arrivals, and I'm there, and he just sits in the car. He doesn't open the trunk. He doesn't open. But let me rewind, okay? Because this is where me telling the whole Mexico lore feeds into this. I want you to remember he painted a picture in Mexico of what his life looked like down to the car. I'm not even going to go into details because it's irrelevant, but let's just say he said he drove a G-Wagon. Theoretically. Well, know that he showed up in a Mazda, okay? And there's nothing wrong with a Mazda. I drive a Ford, okay? And there's nothing wrong. I have no shame in my Ford. But why tell someone you drive a G-Wagon when you drive a Mazda? Like, what was your goal? I assume it was for the flex, but flex is going to come to reality when I show up. And if you're going to live a lie, then go rent a G-Wagon or something. I don't know what to tell you. But it was just so bizarre. So again, doesn't open the doors. Back to the literal situation. Doesn't open the doors. Nothing. I put my luggage in the trunk. I was like, whose car is this? Nothing. No communication. Nothing. So I'm not kidding. I'm not joking. We did not speak the entire ride. Okay. Now let's dive into that, because if you know anything about New York City, I don't want to say it's big, because it's not a lot of space, but because of the traffic and where things are located, it takes a long time to get places. I mean, it is a decent amount of space, but the reason why it takes so long to get places is because of one, traffic and the way that their city's dynamic is set up. Well, obviously I'd never been there, so I didn't know where we were in coordinates to where he lived. All I know is he told me he lived in Manhattan, right? So I flew into JFK. And we're driving to wherever this home is, which, come to find out, isn't in Manhattan at all. It's arguably not even in New York City. That's what's kind of funny. So we're driving, and I see, like, skyscrapers, city line, New York City. And I noticeably notice we are driving away from that. And so I'm just, like, very perplexed. I'm just watching my location, because I was at this point a little concerned, because I'm like, am I getting abducted? I don't feel well. And this whole story, is it to, again, flex the situation, because the situation is far from a flex, and is it to make a situation or dynamic like this look cute? It's more so when your gut tells you something is off, it is not wrong at all, in any way, shape, or form. So when I got to the airport and he wasn't answering, and I opened my phone and there was no texts or calls, and when I got my baggage and I still hadn't heard from him, and then when I did hear from him, he was screaming and calling me out my name and calling me crazy names, and when I was in the car and he wasn't speaking, and then when I realized we're not in the car that he told me he drove, and when we were driving away from the city line, all of those things, yeah, those, red flags. Looking back, because of, what I lived through with this situation, I wish I would have never gotten in the car. I wish I would have jumped out of the car while getting in the car. As soon as I got to his house and realized it was a house in Staten Island, not in Manhattan. Like, there's so many reasons where I should have jumped out the window, as Big Sean says, right? Like, I should have. But at the same time, you don't learn until you live it, right? So I have no regrets in life. However, the situation changed my life forever. So anyway, as I just disclosed, we pull up and we go over multiple bridges, and we end up in a town. Like, it wasn't even a city, it was a town. Like, it looked no different than Westchester, which is where I'm from. And I'm like, where the fuck am I? Like, I am so confused right now. And so I'm literally questioning him, like, where am I? And he's like, and he literally, no lie, tells me, he's like, yeah, my penthouse is under construction, so we have to stay at my parents' house. Keep in mind, I was told in Mexico the parents have nothing, right? So I'm like, well, where do they live? Like, is there space for us? He's like, oh yeah, basically insinuated to me that he bought this home, right? Keep in mind, once we get to this palatial fucking estate, yo, this place was huge, huge. It's like a 5-6 bedroom house, pool in the yard. Like, this place was huge, humongous. So I'm like, and now that the math is just not mathing. Like, you don't have the car. We're having to stay at your parents' house, which if you really had this type of money, we would stay in an apartment, an Airbnb. I mean, a hotel, an Airbnb. Like, so we get to this house. It's beautiful. And we walk in, and immediately I'm just getting hit with questions from this family. What are you doing here? Why are you here? How does your family just let you go these places at this age? And they're just like making me question my entire existence. And I'm like, yo, what is going on? Like, I'm so confused. Come to find out, not that anything's wrong with this, but his family is like Russian. And I'm not sure religiously what they align with, but they are very culturally the way they are. Not that anything's wrong with that, but me and how I live my life was very bizarre to them. I think they were just very complexed on how I was in a situation to where I could just travel freely like that, and how at 19 years old, almost 20, I didn't live with my parents, and very judgmental of me and my lifestyle, and obviously didn't necessarily like be like, oh, you're terrible, you're weird. Now their son said that 100%, but the parents just were very perplexed by me. That's the only way I can put it. So anyway, I get there, I get all my stuff into this man's room, and it's like, okay, you clearly live here. Like, all your shit is here. All your stuff is in this room, and it's like the room you grew up in type of room. Like, walls are painted primary colors room, right? So I'm like, there is no way. There is no way I just left a townhome that I just put myself in, that I'm like so excited about. Again, this isn't even shade towards him or shade towards anyone that's not, but it's the fact that it was all a lie. You have me here on a whole lie. Like, your life is a lie. And immediately I know this, but I'm like trying to see it through so badly. And I think that's the problem that a lot of us face, is we try to see things through when we know from the jump there is no through. There's nothing to see through. Like, it's like looking through binoculars that have caps on them. Like, what are we looking through? We're not looking through anything. What? Immediately, I'm like, okay, so are we going to go to Times Square? Are we going to, Statue of Liberty? Like, what are we doing? And he's just immediately so, like, disgusted by me and clearly not wanting me there. To give you a little lore on him, he is, and that's why we have to be, somewhat encrypted here. He does social media for a living, right? And I kind of knew that he did the whole social media thing, but I didn't know to the extent that it was. And his social media is related to the gym, and I'm going to leave it at that. But just know that instead of me going to all these cool places and all these cool dinners like we had talked about and I had painted a picture in my mind, we went to the gym, and not only did we go to the gym, but I was literally recording this man doing like funny skits in the gym. It wasn't like he was actually like working on himself in the gym. It was like he was kind of a jokester in the gym, I guess, if you want to call it that. I don't know. I'm still very confused to this day. So I was literally like a cameraman. Oh my God, this is so embarrassing. But it goes somewhere. That's even more embarrassing, actually. But I just, again, don't want any of you to do what I did, okay? This is a learning moment here. So I'm this cameraman in the gym, and like all these people are coming up to him because where he's from, everyone knows him, and like people probably other places know him too. And that's why I am not putting his name out there, any of this situation out there, more than I already am, because he is a very scary person. And I'm quite honestly petrified of him. So yeah. So I'm this cameraman every day for the next like 5 or so days. A couple of those days I get him to take me into the city. And every time we did go into the city, which was twice, one time, oh my God, this is so terrible. We would get into like a screaming match. Well, I wouldn't really be screaming. I'd just be getting screamed at, and I'd be like, okay, yeah, okay. One of the times was he got a parking ticket on the street, And he lost his ever-loving mind. He called his mom and he was like freaking the fuck out. And I'm like, it's a parking ticket. Like, I'll just pay it. Like, why are we tweaking? What are we even tweaking for? I'm confused. And then the other time, which this is when I really should have known to leave. And I did leave 24 hours after this. Oh God, this story goes down in history as one of the craziest parts of this trip and craziest things I've ever experienced in my life. But I really wanted to go to Nobu. Anyone that knows me knows I love Nobu. I'd been to multiple Nobus prior to this, but I'd never been to the Nobu in New York. And so we go to Nobu, and I've since been there multiple times. And actually, there's a girl that used to work there. She no longer works there, but we became friends on Instagram because once I went back after this, she knew me from this situation. If that says anything, because you know how many people go to Nobu, New York? A lot of people. So the fact that I am recognizable in there is a problem. So we go to Nobu for my birthday. And if you know anything about Nobu, New York, it's like, well, there's actually 2 locations, but this is the one I think on 57th, and there's like 2 floors. It's their main one. And there's a bar on the first floor, and then you go up these huge flight of stairs, and there's the restaurant area. And God bless the staff and the people that work here, because this was like so diabolical. So I get a drink at the bar, and there was only one seat. So I sat down and he was standing behind me. And I ordered an espresso martini. And I will never forget this because ironically, the man next to me ordered an espresso martini. Okay. And a lot of people, I don't think thought we were together because aesthetically we did not match. Okay. Just to give you a little rundown, I was wearing like a strapless 4-length dress with heels, hair done, makeup done, glammed, like very presentable. He was dead ass wearing ripped black jeans with University 4 Jordans and a black wife beater, I fuck you not, with a puffer on. That was his Nobu fit, okay? So this guy next to me is like, oh my God, great drink. Like, what are you doing here? And me being a dumbass, because I should have known, because prior to this interaction, when we were out and about, anytime I interacted with people, it really upset him because he's insane. So this guy was like talking to me, kikiing with me, and I was like, oh yeah, like it's my birthday, great drink, like cheers, whatever it was. He was like, no way, it's my birthday too. And I was like, oh my God, this is great. I'm like, maybe this man could save me, like this is crazy, please call my parents, get me out of here, like I need help. So he's like, oh my God, like no, happy birthday, like bought my drink, whatever. Which, yeah, is that probably doing too much? Yeah, but like I said, you wouldn't think John Doe is with me because, one, he wasn't even acknowledging me. He was just an innocent bystander in the bar as I sat down at the bar. And 2, he looked like he could be my kid. Like, it was just diabolical. So anyway, then as he's buying me a drink, he's like, happy birthday, beautiful. Have a great dinner, as they're saying our table's ready. And I was like, don't talk to her. Don't fucking talk to her. Do not talk to her. And grabs me and we walk upstairs. And I'm like, oh, this is kind of bizarre. So as we get sat down, I then get my head ripped off. And he's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? I bring you out here and you're just over here doing whatever with all these other guys. I'm like, I'm not. He said something to me. I said it was my birthday. You weren't buying my drink. Like, you weren't sitting next to me. Like, he just covered it and said happy birthday. Like, there was really nothing I could have done to stop that in that situation. Like, there's nothing. And on top of it, I was thinking maybe that man could have called the police and saved me from your ass. So again, but we are literally sitting at this table, and I'm not joking, for probably 20 minutes, I'm just getting annihilated. And I'm sitting there and I'm just bawling my eyes out, like just crying. And not like hysterically crying, like tears are just coming down my face, but I'm not making a peep because I'm like petrified of getting my ass literally beat. So we're sitting there, we're sitting in silence, like absolute fucking silence. So fucking awkward, right? We finally finished dinner, whatever. And ironically, as we're leaving dinner, old buddy with the same birthday as me is also leaving dinner. And him and his buddies are clearly lit. They're like having their good time with each other, living their best lives. And I think they definitely obviously could tell the dynamic was not safe or healthy, and that's why I'm kind of disturbed by what happened next. But as we're walking towards the stairs to leave, the guy like literally speeds up to come up to me and hugs me and is like, oh, beautiful, I hope you have the best birthday, yada yada whatever. And John Doe went ballistic. He legitimately pushed the fuck out of this man, like to try to slam him up against the stairs, is so just incompetent that instead of like pushing him towards the direction of the wall, he pushed him towards the direction of me, which is like how he was like hugging me, and pushed us both down this flight of stairs. Keep in mind, I was wearing a strapless dress, so my dress came off. Yeah, it was a skirt and I didn't have a top on. So I was just topless in Nobu. Yep, that's the story. So anyway, literally I'm bawling in Nobu and no longer have a top on. And I pull my dress on and the hostess looks at me and is like, "Are you okay?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not. We're not okay. Call the police, please. Like, actually, like, I am in danger. Like, I am most definitely in danger." So anyway, he literally grabs me by my wrist, drags me out the restaurant as I'm crying. Heels are in his hands. Like, I don't even have shoes on because I didn't know what to do. Like, I was just standing in Nobu. And he's, like, dragging me out the restaurant, throws me into the car, and literally drives fast as hell. Like, so fast. And anyone that knows me, I'm a fast driver. But this was so fast that it wasn't even like safe. Like I thought we were gonna die. So we literally get home. I don't want to say all is well, because all is not well. Nothing was well at this point. At this point I knew, okay, it's time for me to get out of here. Like I need to get an escape plan. That entire night I'm getting screamed at. And I'm just like thinking to myself, okay, how can I get out of this? I didn't have a lot of options, unfortunately, but thankfully I had enough to get out of the situation. The next morning, he had wanted to work out and do all these shit all day. So I was like, okay, would you mind taking me to meet my friend? And he was like, whatever, like that's fine. So he takes me to meet my friend. Huge shout out to Kennedy. Okay, I cannot thank Kennedy enough for our friendship, our relationship, because the one thing that I did get out of this is an everlasting friendship, and this girl truly showed me what friendship looks like. I had reached out to Kennedy and just kind of wanted to get together. And so thankfully, the funny thing is, just kind of some history on me and Kennedy, we worked together at Foot Locker in Columbus when I first moved there, and then she got a job in New York City. So we didn't really have like a big history and we didn't really know each other that well. So this girl very well could have been like, "Oh, I'm busy," or "No, girl, I don't know you." Like, you know what I mean? Thankfully, she did not. She was like, "Yeah, sure." So I go to her basketball game, and some way or another, I kind of allude to her like, "This situation isn't great. He's really bizarre. All these really weird things are happening, whatever." And I was like, "But I need to get my stuff." That was the biggest issue, is like my stuff was in Staten Island. She lived in Brooklyn. And so she was like, "Okay, well, just go back with him. And then worst case scenario, you just Uber here." Which, yeah, you're going to pay the fine, but it sounds like that situation is a lot worse than the financial fine. And at this point, I hadn't really paid for anything, on the bright side. And so I was like, okay, well, fuck it. You're right. That's what I'm going to do. So I will never forget, he comes and picks me up, and we went to a couple shops in Brooklyn before we went back to Staten Island. And we went in a shop, and ironically, this guy that worked in this shop was from Columbus. And so we were chopping it up for like 20, 30 minutes. And anytime I got interactions with people, I was ecstatic because I was just so petrified of this man, and like being able to have human interaction that was outside of being screamed at was very enticing to me, right? So I'm chopping it up with this dude. Finally, like, we exchange Instagrams. I leave, and again, silent car ride. Because, of course, what I was doing was god awful. Me communicating with human beings, end of the world. Yeah, long story short, he starts airing me out in the car and saying how, like, again, I'm just a terrible person and I'm thirsty and I just want attention and all these things that are just narcissistic and definitely like controlling behaviors and just diabolical. He was just like, I'm literally not joking. I have been through some horrific things in my lifetime. He was top 2 diabolical men I've ever met in my life. Absolutely sick in the head. And at this point I knew it, but it's just like, okay, what's the safest way of getting out of it? Because at this point, the verbal aggression alluded to the fact that there could be some physicalities. And I'm never wrong. I'm never wrong when it comes to things like that. So, of course, lo and behold, when we get home and I'm like, you know what? It's now or never. Like, now is my time to shine. So I essentially unload the clip. I'm like, look, I don't know how to respectfully put this. I don't know if there's any way, especially based off your actions, that you can respectfully receive this information. But first and foremost, I'm leaving. And he's looking at me sideways because I was supposed to be there for a couple more days. Because my smart ass was like, yeah, let's go hang out with someone that we've never seen in the real world for 10 days. That was really smart. Remember when I brought that up? Now look at me in this situation. So he was like looking at me crazy. I was like, yeah, this whole thing, I just can't live in the land of make-believe. And I want to pause there because I kind of missed something that's relatively important to the statement that I was about to make to him. Is my first or second day being there, I actually got the chance to be with his mom and his brother one-on-one because he wanted to go to the gym for the 4th time in one day. And I was like, screw this. I'm not doing that. And his mom was like, hey, like, I'm going to take his brother to his basketball game. If you want to come and watch, like, you can come with us. And I was like, okay, bet. Again, another opportunity to get away from this diabolical psycho man. So I was like, okay, great. So I went to the game and the mom is like telling me things about him. And I'm like, yo, what? And she was just confirming everything that I thought. Like, oh yeah, John Doe, he's never left home. He's taking like 1 class a semester. He doesn't really know what he wants. And he basically just goes to the gym and does his TikToks. And I'm like, what the, like, I knew that. As soon as I got there, I'm like, all right. He capped. Like, this whole thing was a lie. But to have confirmation from his mom, and his mom look at me and be like, yeah, like, basically you shouldn't be with this man. Like, he's got a lot of work to do, is essentially what she was saying. And I respected her honesty. And I also kind of realized that she probably lived a life with John Doe's dad that I probably didn't want for myself. It seemed very much so that John Doe's dad was very controlling of her, and it was just a very controlling culture and dynamic, and that's just not what I want for myself. God bless that woman. I wish her and that family nothing but safety and prosperity, but that whole situation is the opposite of what I want for myself, my future partner, my future family, etc. I bring that up because once I got back to his house after I realized, okay, I'm gonna scat, cat. I just started unloading the clip. I was like, your life's a lie. You lied about literally everything about your life, what you do for work, who you surround yourself with, where you live, what car you drive, everything. It's a lie. And you're extremely narcissistic and a pathological liar. And, you know, there's really no way to put it besides insane. You're insane. You're an extreme manipulator. I've never met someone that can manipulate and get in someone's head like you can and then make the person feel as if they're doing wrong when I haven't done anything since being here. Like, honestly, I've been so calm, cool, and collected. And I'm finally just at a point where I'm like, no, I'm not gonna be cool, calm, and collected. There's something wrong with you. And how you've treated me for the past 7 days is absolutely disgusting. And I will never speak to you and never have anything to do with you again. And if you don't take anything away from our interaction, I want you to take away that the way that you treat people is truly indicative of you and how you are treated in return. So, although I have done nothing in return to you within this interaction, the world is going to deliver to you what you've put into the world. And I'm just being as respectful and calm and collected as I possibly can be. But I truly, looking in this man's eyes, I just sitting here got shivers thinking about this whole interaction, realized I was about to get the shit beat out of me. Like, it was not going to be good. And that's horrible. And like, nobody should be in that situation. Nobody. And immediately he just starts going ballistic, being like, you don't fucking know me, you don't fucking know my family, who are you to come into our fucking house and say shit about us, you're fucking disgusting, you're a whore, you're a this, I don't even know what he was saying. because I was tuning it out and I was packing my shit up. That's what I was doing. As he's just yapping, saying anything and everything under the sun, I'm just shirt in bag, pants in bag, shoes in bag, like literally listening to those words in my head. Okay, grab your makeup. Okay, grab your shampoo, grab your conditioner, grab your loofah. I'm tuning it all out, because once I saw where he was going, well, here's where I knew it was going. As I'm putting things in bag, he's taking them out and he's just throwing them at me, throwing shit at me. And he's like grabbing my arms and not letting me put shit in the suitcase. And I'm like, bro, you don't want me here. You don't like me. Like, we don't like each other. Let me leave. Like, why are you stopping me from getting out of your space? Because I'm horrible. I'm terrible. I'm the worst thing ever. I'm all the names you've called me. Why don't let me leave, right? So he's like restricting me from putting things in the bag, like throwing me to the ground, whatever. I'm like tussling with this man, trying to get as much of my stuff in the bag as possible. And I have 3 suitcases and a backpack. So there is a lot to do in this time. So theoretically, looking back at it, should have probably tried to pack before I unloaded the clip. But I think there was so much built up. Didn't see that. Didn't think that through, obviously. So like I was saying, I'm like packing things up, whatever. And he's obviously being physical and being abusive, but it's not like, okay, I'm hurt, right? So finally, I brought this bag of my liquid stuff, right? And I'm like trying to pack that bag. And I put one perfume. I have these little like Louis Vuitton cinch bags that the perfumes go in. And I put one of the perfumes in there in the cinch bag. And then I'm starting to cinch the next one. And he grabs it and he smacks the fuck out of my head with this fragrance. And my head is now bleeding. And I'm like, oh dear God, like I'm going to bleed out and die in New York. Like, this is terrible. He's like fucking still like that didn't like, he didn't do that and was like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. No. We're still going at it. He's like chucking my shit over. So he's on like the 2nd floor of a multi-story home. He's like chucking my suitcases over the balcony onto the 1st floor, which is right by the front door. So I'm like, okay, well, that works. Like, you're fucking up my suitcase, but at least my shit's going to be right by the front door. Like, I told Kennedy, like, I'm on my way. Uber's on the way, whatever, right? Think about it. As he's throwing my stuff, like, I'm telling you, not only is he yelling at me so everyone in the house can hear it, but he is like throwing my shit. So as he's throwing my shit, it hits the ground hard as hell, right? Well, his dad works in the basement. This is the most bizarre part of the whole story for me, right? So I'm clearly physically upset, physically distraught. Blood is on my clothes. Like, I'm not well. I'm trying to change, get all my stuff together, get out of this house. His dad walks upstairs as I'm trying to fix my suitcase and get one suitcase out, get the next suitcase out, get the next suitcase out. Comes upstairs, looks at me, looks at John Doe, sees that I'm distraught as can be. Okay? Like, I'm probably the most distraught I've ever been in my life. Looks at both of us, closes the door, and locks it. Yep, just looks, makes eye contact with both of us, turns around, goes back into the basement, closes the door, and locks it. And that's when I realized, oh, so you guys do this shit around here. This is normal. Because God forbid my brother had a girl fly across the country to stay with our family, and he's trying to beat her ass. And my dad came upstairs and saw that going on. Who in their right mind would just look at that and be like, interesting, turn around? People that beat women. Like, what? It was diabolical. So literally half of my shit, moral story, half of my shit gets left behind because I'm at this point, I'm like, all right, I just got to get in this Uber and figure it out. The Uber driver pulls up, sees my shit all over the yard, like bags and stuff everywhere. I'm crying. I'm literally holding my head. Like, it was just terrible. I smell like straight fragrance. Like, I literally smelled like a Bath and Body Works because the fragrance bottle was shattered over my head. So like, my hair is drenched in fragrance. Like, shout out California Dream. Kennedy's a real one. I brought 2 bottles of California Dream with me, and Kennedy ended up leaving. Like, I left her one as significance to the story because what in the actual hell happened? So I get in the Uber driver's car, and he's like, yo, what is going on? And I was like, you need to go. Like, that's what's going on. You need to drive, drive, Like, go. Like, we could get shot. Like, keep going, drive. And so I am just bawling my eyes out to him, telling him about the situation. Like, He's like, do we need to go to the hospital? Whatever. I'm like, no, like, I'm fine. I need you to get me to my fucking friend's house. We need to go. Okay? We need to leave. I never need to look back. And next thing I know, I get a text from John Doe on my phone. To this day, 2 years later, 2 years and some change later, I've never read that text. I've never looked at that text because I know it's absolutely disgusting and I want absolutely nothing to do with him. So I received the text and I blocked him on all accounts. And we drove off into the distance to Brooklyn. So it was an hour-long drive. The whole time I'm crying to him and he's telling me the story about his daughter and her experience with domestic violence and how that shit's real. And it's just crazy that as soon as that interaction happens, my first interaction following that, and it was 5 minutes later, that person had faced the exact same thing. Well, his child. But my point is, I don't know how I feel about publishing this on the internet. Because this is very controversial. I'm going to have people that listen to this call me, tell me, why did you do this? I'm going to have people call me and tell me, that episode changed my life. And even if I get 100 calls and only one is thank you for sharing that, that makes this all worth it. Why? Because this shit is real. Unfortunately, that's not my only situation with domestic violence. And that wasn't even bad. Like, it's not like he tried to kill me. Unfortunately, years prior to that, someone tried to kill me. And it's just like, when does it get to a point as a society where we think this is weird? Or this is wrong? Or this is absolutely diabolical? It's just so normalized. And that's why when I was talking to people about telling this story, I feel like so many people in my life, they just see this, the situation's bizarre, but it's normalized to them, right? Because this is not my only occasion with this type of situation. And it's like, why? Why are we sitting back? Why are we accepting? Why are we tolerating? Why are we normalizing something this changed my life forever, right? Like, everything about how I see the world is different now. And don't get me wrong, I still travel. I still travel and see people. I still do things. Like, it doesn't stop me from living. But I live with a lot more guard. I don't want to say fear, because I wouldn't say I live with fear, but I live so much more guarded. And I think that limits me from people and dynamics and situations. And it's unfortunate. And that's why I don't regret anything. I don't regret this trip. I don't regret this situation. I don't regret meeting him, nothing. Because I needed to meet him to learn something. And to learn that this world is not sunshine and rainbows. And I knew that before meeting him. But when you put traveling and adulthood into the dynamic, because unfortunately, which we'll get into at a different time, the only other DV situations I've been in, I was young, very young. And it wasn't within my family, so I don't want anybody to assume or think that. But I was very young, so all of these other factors weren't involved. But when you make decisions that risk is involved, i.e. traveling to see someone, just make sure you have some sort of plan if things go wrong. Which now I'm of age to where I can go stay and get in a car and go anywhere, so it's not really. But even if I do travel to, let's just say I travel to LA, right? Well, that's a bad example because I know a lot of people there, but we're somewhere I don't really know people. Let's just say I go to Montana, okay? Not a lot of people in Montana. If I meet up with someone and they're nothing like who I thought they were, or even if there's someone I know and things just go sideways and things get violent, what are you going to do? How are you going to get yourself out of that situation? And again, what inspired me to do this was Alex Cooper did a podcast episode about a very similar situation, but she went to Paris. That's another country. That's another continent, right? And when you're put in situations like that, yeah, it's so fun. You're young. You only live once. Your 20s are such an exciting, open, and vulnerable time to where you can really do anything, go anywhere, meet anyone, and it's amazing. I don't want that to get misconstrued. Because since this situation, I have had some incredible experiences with people and been able to travel and do all sorts of things that my younger self would be like, oh my God, that's so cool. But at the price of what, right? Like, you are always risking something by putting yourself out there. So when putting yourself out there, just don't ignore the flags. Like, that's what I'm always going to go back to. is throughout this whole situation, I know I've taken you down so many different side quests and so many different rabbit holes, but I continue to push whatever you feel in your gut and whatever you feel in your soul. Do not ignore that. And that's in any situation. I'm not saying, oh, you need to go meet a guy in New York. You need to go meet a guy in LA. You need to go meet a guy in Chicago. You don't need to go meet someone to learn these things. God, honestly, if I can give you any advice, don't meet people other places. It's risky. My point is more so, don't ignore the flags of people when they show you signs of things that you know don't align with your beliefs and your preferences and what you want for yourself in your future and the future of you and yours, right? As I always say, then don't keep them around, or don't put them in a partner position. Maybe they're just supposed to be a friend or a colleague or stay in a specific lane, but your gut is always right. And I think so often we ignore it because we see light and we see good in others. And although others may have positive traits and things that you are looking for in a friend, in a partner, or in whatever position they play in your life, those positive traits don't take away from things that are alarming. And I'm not saying anyone's going to be perfect because that's, far from the truth. But this life is short, man. I mean, I'm not even a quarter of the way through it, but, well, probably about a quarter. I'm only about a quarter of the way through it. And I still think it's so precious, and you should really fill your time with people and things they're worthwhile. And, unfortunately, I've been through so many hardships, and I think that's made me into an incredible person and made me strong. But I don't wish any of these dynamics or situations or stories on anyone. Like this story, I only share, like I've said, to open people's eyes of, God, this person in my life, they do a lot of things that are alarming or are red flags. Or, maybe I shouldn't invest as much time into that person and invest more time into myself. Or maybe I should spend more time with my family rather than this, this girl or guy that only gives me a minute of the day. Well, yeah. And if your gut's telling you that, then listen to it. And I know it's easier said than done. And I know there's a lot of times where you feel like you're attached or there's reasons why you do need to stay around. But, the one thing through all this that I always say is time is healing. So in order to separate yourself from situations and dynamics that you aren't bettering your future, just give it space and time and eventually you'll heal. So thank you so much for taking the time to listen to this episode, because I know this is definitely a bizarre one. And for those that have listened to all of season 1 and now season 2, episode 1 and 2, I know that I'm going in so many different directions at this point. I had interviews last year. My first episode was a recap. Now we're talking about a domestic violence story time. But I don't want to be viewed as something so narrow, because my life is so broad and there's so many parts of it that people don't know and they don't need to know. But I think some things are worth sharing if it's going to help someone else through a time that they didn't think or they might be experiencing right now. Because trust and believe, when I lived through this story, I did not think I was going to see it through. It took a lot of healing. I'll just say that. Like that was only 2 years ago. I don't really think about that situation much, which is a miracle, but it took a lot of time. And so if you are currently overcoming any sort of emotional or physical violence, I just want you to know time is healing. Whether or not you believe it or feel it right now, because you probably don't think it's to be true and you probably think it's the end of the world. And I thought it was too. It's not. And it only is if you let it be the end of the world and find things that not just distract you but bring that peace and prosperity back into your life, whether that be working out, whether that be a job, whether that be friends, whether that be activities, trips. Do what brings the life back into you, because I've had a lot of highs and lows, and right now I'm currently going back up that roller coaster hill to try to get back to a better place. But I look at situations like that and I'm like, damn, I'm in a lot better of a place now than I was then. So for that, I can say amen. So, again, thank you so much for taking the time and the energy to listen to this episode. And I hope many of you out there that could really hear this and relate to this and know that with any situation like that, there is a other side and time is truly healing. So, thank you so much for tuning in to season 2, episode 2. I'm thinking a video episode's coming soon. We have something in the works, so if you're a video lover, I do have some interviews set up, so that should be pretty sick to get back into that. But we have more story times to come down the road. Thank you again for tuning back in to season 2, episode 2 of the Save the Best for Last podcast. I'll be back next month. Bye.